emerged around what exactly constitutes privacy and what constitutes privacy technology. A lot of mysteries remain to be solved in this period, but here we are at a session organized by policy think tank The Dialogue, where we are going to be talking about the future of privacy, especially in reference to Indians and Indian citizens across the spectrum. Now, since the Puttaswamy judgment and privacy being declared a fundamental right, we have come to look forward to a lot of attacks. I mean, cyber threats have become a constant reality for us, whether it's Russia's cyber war against Ukraine or whether the cyber attack on AIMS. Data breaches have become a common factor, which means that the need for privacy and privacy technology is ever increasing. So, to start off with, we have the Dialogues project manager, Kamesh Shekhar, who's going to be introducing us to what exactly is privacy technology. Kamesh leads the privacy and data governance vertical at the Dialogue. His area of research covers informational privacy, surveillance technology, intermediary liability, safe harbor issues, and issues of misinformation and disinformation on social media. Prior to this, Kamesh has also worked as a communications associate at Dwara Research and holds a PGP in public policy from Takshila University. He has an MA in Media and Cultural Studies and a bachelor's in Social Sciences from the Tata Institute of Technology. So, Kamesh, this is over to you to introduce us and make privacy tech something familiar that everyone can relate to and understand.
Thank you so much, Diksha, for that really nice intro to this topic, which is very, very relevant and very excited to be in this panel today. Let me quickly share my screen. Um, just a second. I think I need to allow it.
As Kamesh proceeds to share his screen, let me also talk to you about how we're going to be talking about different kinds of verticals when it comes to privacy tech. And I, of course, Diksha Bhardwaj from Hindustan Times will be your moderator for this session. We are going to talk about both the supply chain side and the demand side, as well as the technical challenges that are being presented every day as newer technologies emerge. So, Kamesh, I hope you're ready. Let's
I think there's some access issues, but I think I can start with whatever I wanted to talk about. Just briefly, today I wanted to touch upon a very snapshot of the report which would be coming out very soon, which is titled "Towards a National Strategy for Privacy Technologies." We are so enthusiastic about that report, hence we wanted to give a snapshot about what the report is, and it would be just like a teaser for you guys, and then the report will come soon. So just giving a little bit background towards what has been our ideologies and thought processes, that the first stage of evolution of privacy tech was marked for complying with most of these legislations which has been enacted within the data protection and privacy space across the globe. But quickly, what we have seen through our research, from this compliance, there has been a moving towards data producers quickly recognizing the competitive advantage they could gain by securing privacy for customers. However, what we have actually seen is
Kamish, you can meet the presenter. Now you can. Yeah, please switch on here. Your camera is not on. Now you can present.
sure, but I think there's some system preference thing is not granted from my laptop. That's the reason, I suppose.
Okay.
So yeah, it's okay. I can go ahead and talk about it.
Okay.
So what we have actually seen from as the context for this session was also that India's privacy tech industry is little bit what to say, different from the Western markets, and it has faced with unique challenges and several structural constraints are there, and also specific issues towards demand and supply side of the market. So against this backdrop, a little bit what we have done through our study is that what could be the way forward in terms of bringing a concerted effort towards how various stakeholders can contribute towards making the enhancing this industry, which is the privacy tech itself. So what we have done in the report is like went across, like spoke about little bit of a recommendations that we could like actually give to various stakeholders, which starts from government, private sectors, investors, civil society, and etc. And subsequently, which would actually lead to the increase of the privacy tech solutions, and which in turn actually brings the protection for users' privacy interest. So, like, just not going into much detail here about like some of the demand side and supply side challenges that we have actually looked into is that like the challenges are both from demand side and supply side, and at the demand side, like we kind of like looked the list of like stuff that we have come across is that like one starting with itself is like lack of the privacy centric culture. So here if you see like businesses have primarily like been only towards compliance and looked privacy a little bit on the compliance technology side, where it kind of like not really looking it from the perspective of like what the value addition the privacy could do for in the long privacy tech could do in terms of like protecting your consumers, which would bring a competitive advantage for you in the longer run. Like secondly, what we have seen is the limited focus on this value creation from data. Like one of the important aspects that is that there's very limitations in businesses how they actually look at the usage of privacy tech itself, because sometimes they're overwhelmed with the amount of data they actually get. So like kind of like privacy tech can also help you. If you could give an example, like this like data mapping could really help you to like map the data properly to make like better value creation from your data. Secondly, as I said again, it's the value creation which the privacy tech will do through competitive advantage, which is the privacy itself. Third important demand side was the low demand from users itself, which we obviously know there's a long way to go before privacy concerns of users can actually significantly impact our behavior in terms of technologies and how our processes and etc. is done. Obviously, things are evolving at that front, but like it is also one of the challenges that is faced. From supply side, if you see, there is a little bit of lack of consensus on the theoretical framework, if I could say. That's because like I think like this industry is also like evolving, and we don't really know there is no consensus in terms of what is privacy technology in terms of theory background or definitions and etc. But like as we move forward, we also think that like it's a matter of time, and like later these gaps will be filled in. And one more aspect is the regulatory landscape changes itself, right? Like like the any jurisdictions, if you witness, there's a regular shifts in terms of how this privacy is tackled. So that makes like brings in this aspect of like alterations and delay in making the feasible solutions. Finally, like go in the global competitiveness itself, if you look like there's very limited amount of like privacy tech companies which are emerging from India itself. So and also the amount of technology that is provided is also very restricted to couple of technologies and not much to the other aspects across the data lifecycle, which you guys will come to know when the report is out. Um, Finally, like what we have like looked into is like the way forward, and like we think there is a concerted effort needed for like tackling any of such these problems, where we start with the government itself, like where they could give various regulatory enablers, which like not moving beyond like having a single window clearance and etc., like giving some exemptions, sandbox mechanisms and etc. And also we think like there could be a mechanism where incentives like in-kind incentives and like also direct incentives could be given. Physical support is obviously is one of the important aspect that they could give across the life chain of the startups when they are growing and etc. Finally, like second, we also look at the private enterprises, and like if you look into the private enterprises side, like it is more on the lines of like background what we want to it's more on the lines of like starting from top to the bottom. It has to start from the governance, where like the privacy governance has to become a part or integral part of the leadership and executive itself, and then like moving down towards like how this can be built within the capacity of the employees and etc. within their companies, and moving and thinking beyond non-compliance, which I was like just mentioning, and identifying like appropriate solutions. Basically, sometimes appropriate solution is also important. And finally, one more is the investors. And investors, I think like there is two ways to do this. One is like obviously investing for the technology itself. Second way is like propounding privacy tech to be inculcated within the business where you invest. And way forward, civil society, yes, they play important role when it comes to one of the challenges that we looked into in the demand side itself is the user understanding the privacy concerns, where they can break this privacy paradox concept and like bring in more efficiency in knowledge building and etc. So this is like very like bird's eye view of like what we have done, and yeah, look forward to questions and to this panel. Thanks Diksha, over to you.
Thank you, Kamesh, for that very nice introduction and the teaser to your report. Now that all our panelists have joined, let me take this chance to tell you what the session is and how the session will progress. So we have Benny Chugh with us, we have Mr. Aditya Uchi, and we have Professor Debayan Gupta. Everyone will be talking about a separate vertical. We'll go from one panelist to another, where we'll address some questions. And at the end of the session, we'll take questions from the audience in case there are any. So let's start with Benny. Benny, you've been at the forefront of this conversation about privacy tech, and you manage the Future of Finance initiative. You are focusing on systemic stability and consumer protection in digital finance, especially with a concerted focus on low-income households. You're working at Dwara Research, which is one of the foremost privacy tech companies here in the country, which is implementing a citizen-centric digital social protection for delivery platforms. I mean, Benny also, for the information of the rest of our attendees, has a master's in public policy from NLU SIU, Bangalore, and an MA in developmental economics. So, Benny, over to you. Let's hear about what do you think. I mean, privacy as a concept a decade ago was addressed as something that was elite. That was something that was the privileged, which was a privileged notion. But now we are talking about privacy across the spectrum. So how have the needs of the citizens changed? How exactly do you see, especially when you analyze low-income households, how exactly do you perceive their idea of privacy and their need for it, especially when it comes to financial inclusion?
Thanks, Diksha. Thanks for that really kind introduction. Some of it I have completely not earned. Just to put things in perspective, I work with Dwara Research. Dwara Research is a policy think tank that focuses on issues of financial inclusion and digital social protection. And really, I'm not at the forefront of privacy tech as much as I would have liked to be, because that's obviously the coolest thing to do around here. But what I do in my day job is think about customer protection issues in digital finance, as well as causes of exclusion in digital social protection. Now, it's the digital aspect, right? So when we started kind of plotting what were the biggest kind of customer protection issues in digital finance, it was privacy and misuse of personal data. That was one of the biggest kind of customer protection risks, perhaps even more accentuated than, let's say, traditional finance, right? So that's how we started talking about privacy in our kind of line of work. It was very much a focus on financial inclusion, but how an abuse of people's personal data or a failure to kind of handle it well could directly intervene financial inclusion and actually lead to worse financial outcomes for customers. So that was our entry point, right? And to your question as to, has there been a switch? I don't think so. I'll recall an experience which is now about 15 to 16 years old. It's not a first-hand experience. It's something that our founder kind of documented on the Dwara Research blog. So when Dwara started out its journey as a microfinance NBFC, for those of us who are not from India or may kind of just benefit from a quick whiz of what microfinance is, one of the dominant models is a joint liability group loan. What that means is that 5 people come together and they kind of become members in their social collateral, and they kind of are each other's social guarantee, and the group, and then they get a loan as a group, right? The loan is free, and then they repay as a group. So that's the JLG idea. And when we started providing JLG loans, we realized that there was a wooden bench where we would bring the members on board and we would ask, hey, what would you need the loan for? What would you need the loan for, etc. And we realized that the women were not opening up. And the moment we replaced the bench with a stool with a seating capacity of 1, with other members being at perhaps only a half a feet's distance, we realized that people started opening up that I want this for a wedding or I want this for some agriculture. So even in that tightly knit group where people are actually kind of vouching for each other's ability to repay, where they are so kind of interdependent in their everyday lives, there was this notion of not wanting to share more than what is necessary to the group, right? So therefore, and this is low income, this is rural India, and which kind of, how do I say, demystifies all the, if I can call it that, urban legends that we have around privacy, right? That it's for the elite, it's for the high income, poor people don't care about privacy, blah, blah, blah. Of course, poor people don't care about privacy because the choice that we give them is to say, pay for it through your teeth or pick a meal. They're like, sure, I'll let go of my privacy. We are making the trade off that hard for them that either you get to survive, either you get your pension or you get your privacy. And sure, they're choosing survival, but is that a preference? I don't think so. And this is what repeatedly our studies are telling us on the ground, right? So the team and I are currently completing a 3,000 people study. And there we understand that even when sharing information with financial service providers, there is this lack of willingness to share complete information. And this is not to say that people are lying about their information, but the question they're asking is, why does my lender need to know this? Or why does my health insurer need to know this? What does my lender have to do with how much money I have in gold savings? Right? They should only be worried about my income. So yes, poor people care about privacy as much as the other income brackets do. And I think the kind of biggest endorsement, if the world needed one, came from the Puttaswamy judgment, which basically said that privacy is not just a fundamental human right, it's the very core of us being humans, right? It's an inherent a natural right, and therefore when it's an inherent natural right, it obviously transcends all income barriers, all kind of geographical barriers. So there hasn't been a switch. But to your question, consciousness around privacy has definitely increased. It came in the public discourse for some other reason for India's identity kind of program. And that's when it became really transparent to people and it became really vivid to people that yes, there's our personal data. And also the simultaneous, I wouldn't kind of just hang the quote on just the identity program, right? The simultaneous kind of datafication of our lives, as it were, as more of us kind of lived our lives online, as more of us moved to digital banking, digital social networking, digital chatting, like when else in humanity have we actually shared our deeply personal information over mobile phones? It's just now. So as we as a society were kind of waking up to the various dimensions of what this datafication is doing, that's when privacy became more and more important in our consciousness, or perhaps we got the vocabulary to articulate it in so much kind of clarity that we are doing now. But privacy as an inherent choice and preference has always been present, is my sense.
So since you've talked about financial inclusion and you've also said that privacy as a matter of fact, has raised awareness and it's become a concern among different kinds of households and not just the elite, it's expanded its ambit. And I'll take a very colloquial example because I'm sure everyone watches Netflix and has seen Jamtara. So financial frauds are a major part of cyber frauds. It's one of the major concerns. And a lot of people are willing to forego their very personal details and share them. Do you see a reticence towards that? I mean, are we now looking at people being more conscious about sharing, whether it's their card details or their OTPs, etc.? Is that kind of awareness now filtering through different sections of society?
Thank you, Deeksha. And actually, thank you very much for this question, because at Dwara, we're just wrapping a study to understand UPI frauds better. What makes people fall for them, what is the recourse available, what the regulator can do, etc., etc. And the top line there is, it's not that people are very willing. So sitting here, we think that, oh my God, they're sharing data at the throw of a hat. That's not how it's actually happening, right? When you look at how these scammers are actually approaching people, what we understand is the the narrative is very well crafted, right? They're tapping into people's biggest insecurities. So they're saying things like, hey, your account is going to get suspended. Your KYC is out of date. If you don't share it, you will not be able to withdraw money. If you don't share this, you will lose your savings, right? Or if you don't share this, you will not be able to use your ATM card. Now, for a person who does not understand the financial system well, the fear of losing money, the sense of loss aversion of getting an account closed, because let me remind you, going to a bank is still a very unpleasant experience for the majority of Indians out there, right? There's intimidation, there's sense of insecurity, there's kind of and then it's documented, right? So there was this early paper that Dwara did. It's called Barriers to Basic Banking Services, and we document all of this, all of the social distance between a person and a bank. Forget the physical distance and the economic distance, right? So going to a bank is still not a great thought for many of us. And when we say that, hey, your account is going to get shut if you don't do this, people are actually falling into prey or falling for that sense of urgency due to their own loss aversion, due to their own mental biases, and going ahead and sharing that information. To your question, is it still happening? I think some of RBI's campaigns have had a very deep effect on people. So, for instance, the likelihood of use, if I were a fraudulent actor and I was calling up people and saying, hey, I need your OTP, the likelihood of me succeeding is really low, because the OTP campaign has been really powerful and it has been really insightful, and it has been hammered down into people that you're not supposed to share this. However, if I tell them that, hey, you know what, you won this lottery that you applied for, it's just 4,000 rupees, send me 400 rupees and you'll get the 4,400. I'm still more likely to succeed, because then I'm kind of tapping into people's exuberance bias. This is a low income person for whom 4,000 is approximately 20% of their monthly income, right? So some campaigns have been successful, but more awareness needs to be created as to more sophisticated narratives are out there, and people need to be switched on to say, no, this is fishy. And currently that mechanism doesn't exist. People can't right now distinguish between a genuine message from a genuine player versus a fake message from a fake player on their messages, right? And I think that's the biggest challenge that we as digital financial kind of players have to counter, that people are not able to distinguish what is genuine and what is not.
Exactly. So, I mean, the government itself is trying to a certain extent to make, the idea of privacy more accessible, the idea of legitimate information more accessible by starting common service centers, etc. So, to wrap up the session, unfortunately, Benny, we have a limited amount of time for all our speakers. So, to wrap up the session, I'd like to ask you, do you see a collaboration happening with the government wherein you think privacy tech players, private players can come in and help aid the government, or at least provide better solutions, more effective solutions, so that all the people across the spectrum can become aware of their rights?
So I think what the government can do is carve out a role for them, right? So I don't know, perhaps there are fiscal measures that the government can take in terms of subsidization, but I'm not a fiscal or public finance expert, so I wouldn't know. But in our limited ecosystem, what they could do is they could literally carve out roles, right? So for instance, the previous version of the data protection bill did that to some extent by laying out privacy by design and what it meant. What that clearly would have meant is a clear impetus to everybody who's working on the privacy by design side of things to say, hey, now is our time, or data auditors, etc. Right? Some of those have now been dispensed with in the new bill. For better or for worse, that's a different conversation. But really, what the government can do is make transparent the need for such startups to other players in this ecosystem, saying that this is a good to have, this is a basic guideline, without kind of getting prescriptive about what exactly privacy enhancing technology these guys have to use, because ultimately the person in charge of the business is the best judge of the kind of tech that they need. But to kind of signal to the others that there is privacy enhancing technology, it is good to have, why don't you consider it, and how they do it through soft guidelines, etc., is perhaps one way. But I haven't really thought about this question a lot, so that's just off the top of my head.
I think that's something for you to explore in the future in that case. Thank you so much, Benny. That was very enlightening. We'll move on to our next speaker. Aditya, welcome. And thank you so much for joining us. For all of you who do not know Aditya Bucci, he has an engineering degree and has served a long stint in California. He started at Media Mint, one of the world's leading digital marketing agencies, whose clientele includes some of the biggest advertising platforms. He then went on to start Zipper, the first location intelligence co, and his new company Doosra addresses the mobile privacy issue. So Aditya, I mean, we've been talking about privacy, we've been talking about the supply side of it. On the demand side of it, what do you think? I mean, what do consumers really want? Right. What are the challenges you are tackling with your new company when it comes to providing privacy enhancing technologies to your consumers?
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me on the panel. I think there's two things that as we started off Doosra, obviously with a very privacy focused kind of offering, and what we realized is, uh, you know, there's two things that we're battling. One is this notion that privacy equals secrecy in from a perception standpoint, right? So if somebody says that they demand privacy, then people roll up their eyes. Hey, why do you need privacy? Are you doing something nefarious? Things like that, right? So it almost became taboo for somebody to expect privacy in any kind of setting, whether it could be in a physical setting or it could be in a digital setting. That is one thing that we were battling when we first started off. The second thing that we've seen is as we sort of started to bring on users onto our platform, while they were talking about privacy, it still is a very nebulous concept. So as a result of that, we started to dig deeper into understanding, why are people getting a Dusra number, right? So, and what we realized is it's really the concept of having alternate digital identities. So today, what's happened over the last 10 years is your mobile number has become your de facto person identifier, right? For right or for wrong, and people didn't really realize the ramifications of it. But now, as they start to realize, as they see and hear more about data leaks, they're saying, okay, this is my personal mobile number. I need to keep it personal, but I need to have another number that I need to communicate to, like an insurance portal, or give it at a security guard, when I'm entering a building, things like that, right? So it's this notion of, while they're not exactly calling it privacy, they're saying that I need to have different identities to deal with different sort of sets of people, depending on the level of trust that I have. So those are the two sort of broad things that we're seeing: privacy versus secrecy, and the need for alternate identities rather than calling it specifically privacy.
Do you think there is a systematic change in the way that we are viewing privacy technologies? I mean, you're talking about mobile numbers as being something of a unique identification number, right? Something that is way too personal to you. So, in the way that people are perceiving privacy, have you seen that at Dusra? I mean, has your clientele approached you about this, and what kind of expectations do they have from you? And also to talk about the fact that India in itself, do you think has a kind of environment wherein privacy tech can grow?
Yeah, no, I think one of the things that I mean, obviously we had we are very bullish on where privacy will eventually go, right? I think the timeline in which we will be able to get there is the one that we are really trying to sort of do some sort of crystal gazing, right? And what we've noticed is, our users, there are two sets of users that you will find even within our audience. There are ones that are extremely privacy focused. They want to create a level of anonymity, right? And that they really pride themselves in, and how they give out their number. They ask us questions. Okay, do you guys get to see our messages? How do you handle data management after an account is deleted? So they get very technical. And then there is these other set of users that are what I call casual users. They're coming here because they see that, oh, this is a great way for me to get a second number. And I have always had a second SIM card that I was using it like my second number, but it's just too
That's
much
been
of
the
a hassle
approach.
to do it. So I'm just
Even
going to
me as
get myself a
a man
Dusra
has
number.
been taking that approach. I've just been using a second SIM card. So how exactly, what is the alternative approach?
No, I think, see, the way that I see this is we do have to take some level of ownership of our own data, right? And the fact that you took a second SIM card is you taking a step towards, managing your own data ownership, right? Which is, if it is a security guard, you will give that second number, you will not give your personal number. So what we are doing is essentially taking that existing behavior and making that much more easy to sort of adopt into, right? So you download the app, you get a Dusra number, and you're able to manage it. You don't have to manage another SIM card, recharge it, all of those things, right? So we have to sort of, build on existing behaviors, which is what we're trying to do with the second number, but also continue to educate our users and stand, very staunchly for privacy, so that, some big Armageddon is going to happen in the next few years. We don't know whether it's going to be tomorrow or it's going to be 5 years later, but we need to make sure that at that point of time we are adequately equipped as consumers to be able to manage it.
But are the concerns limited just to phone numbers? I mean, what other kind of concerns have been raised by your clientele? I mean, is there? Yes, sorry, you were saying something.
Yeah, so I think there's 2, 3 pieces that we see, right? One is we obviously started off with a mobile number because that is the one that we see the most prevalent and widespread in India just in terms of identity fraud. But then there's obviously other things that people started to realize. I think you guys talked about the whole financial fraud and things like that, right? So people are sort of waking up to it. And then there is the third piece, which is in general around making sure that there are other forms of identity, right? Which is your credit card and things. You guys hear me?
We lost
I see
you there.
everyone.
Can everyone else hear Aditya? I can't.
You guys hear me?
Yeah, you're back. Yes.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that. So what I'm saying is that I think as much as people talk about the mobile number, which is the most prevalent form of identity, there's other pieces around. Okay, how do I better protect my other forms of personal information, right? Which is whether it could be email address, it could be credit card, and things like that. And then the last piece is in general, I think there's growing awareness about awareness around biometrics. Not tapping into it today, but something that is going to be very important as we go on because biometrics are.
Aditya, you're breaking up again.
Have to find.
I think there's some problem with your internet connection. Okay, but I mean, until you can join back, some very interesting points that you mentioned, like credit card details and even biometrics. That gives me an opening to move on to our next speaker, of course, Professor Debayan Gupta, who's a technical expert in the field. Professor Debayan Gupta, teaches computer science at Ashoka University, where he takes a course on security and privacy, as well as an introductory programming class. He's a visiting professor and a research affiliate at MIT and MIT Sloan. Before coming to Ashoka, he held an extraordinary faculty position in the Department of Electrical Engineering and Computer Sciences at MIT. So he has a PhD from Yale and a bachelor's degree from St. Xavier's College, and has worked on areas like secure competition, cryptography, and privacy. So you dabble in the theoretical and the technical aspect of what constitutes privacy, especially what constitutes encryption, which has been a big question mark as we talk about and as we go forward in discussing how privacy tech will operate. So do you really think that the information that you and I exchange on these so-called encrypted platforms is actually protected?
Okay, so 3-4 things. First, yes, for a lot of these platforms, especially the end-to-end encrypted ones, whether you're talking Signal or WhatsApp, once it's on the system, it's usually fairly safe. All right. The problem occurs when there may be issues with the phone itself, with the end. Just because something is secure end-to-end, that doesn't protect you if someone's sitting in your house, right? If there is a rootkit on your phone itself, then there is no amount of protection that will save you, right? It doesn't matter how secure the OTP system is or something else is if you give out your OTP, right? In fact, a lot of the attacks we've seen are more along the lines of what was discussed before, which is essentially social engineering style stuff, right? Someone convinces you. And I really want to emphasize or highlight something that was said a little bit earlier by, I believe, the first speaker, Benny, which was that we shouldn't get too arrogant about this stuff. Oh, they fell for it, I never would. Right? It just takes one moment of weakness. It just takes, one day when you're too overworked to think about it and some stupid phone call comes and they catch you at the right time. Right? And I think I know a lot of otherwise, quote unquote, clever people who've fallen for this stuff.
I'll cop out to it. I have on Instagram lost money to a random website because I thought it was legitimate.
Yeah. So financial frauds take advantage of this stuff a lot, but that's another sort of can of worms. So while people were speaking, I was taking some notes, and I have a list of quick comments to make. Um, so first, I want to be very careful when I'm defining privacy, because as I've learned, I've spent a lot of time going around talking to judges, to lawyers, to people whose ground level people whose privacy has been broken in their own opinion, and so on and so forth. Everyone has a different definition. Okay, everybody has a different definition of privacy. And with things like when we were talking about financial frauds and OTP, I want to separate out two ideas of private information versus sensitive information versus secret information, right? There may be information which is a secret, but not all information is entirely a secret. So suppose I have a particular disease, I don't want to hide it from my doctor. I do want some people to know. I want control over who has that information. So this is to do with sort of purpose limiting the usage of information. The way Justice Chandrachud and others have looked into definitions of privacy have also been very different from this, right? There's an entire idea around compelled speech. Okay, so I'm not talking about big things. You go to a local CCD or something to get a cup of coffee. You go to Pantaloons and buy a pair of pants. You go to the billing counter and they're like, phone number. Like, why do you need my phone number for me to get a cup of coffee? So the way the Indian legal system defines this is by saying compelled speech, right? You cannot. So it's saying that if I need to provide something, if I need to speak in order to get something, and if I do not speak, I will not get that basic service. I am being denied service unless I compel. Unless I speak. That's compelled speech. So privacy is sort of being approached in this very roundabout fashion sometimes, right? And if we as people who are policy thinkers or technical thinkers are not deeply connected enough with the way the legal profession is sort of in an ad hoc way adjudicating this stuff, we're going to get into a lot of trouble sooner or later, right? The second point I wanted to quickly make is that the culture issue that also someone mentioned, it's huge, right? Like nowadays, the average teenager isn't angry that the intelligence agency looked at their private post. They're angry they didn't hit like, right? Like, how do you talk about privacy where we, in a world where we are actively putting everything out about ourselves all the time, hoping to God that somebody is going to pay attention to us? We're in the attention economy, right? And everyone's constantly putting stuff up. And it's all of us. It's not just the poor. We're talking about privacy. You go to your US visa, chup chap de do. Fingerprints, bank records, everyone, we'll all give. Whatever they ask for, we'll all give because we need that thing, right? And
It's a matter of priorities.
It's a matter of priorities.
Everyone's priorities are different. I mean,
yeah. The same people who are complaining about the Indian government or Facebook, getting too much profiling data, when it's time to give the UK visa or US visa, they'll give away everything, right? Very quickly, no questions asked. So I think we need to, you can't stop this by telling people to be better people or be more aware of their privacy. That is important. It is necessary, but not sufficient. We need fairly tough legislation around this. What exact form that legislation will take, I don't have the faintest idea. All right. The other 2 points I quickly wanted to make is, look, how the people who are going to be listening to this at some point, they're going to know a lot of the other points, right? We shouldn't give away this information, that information, blah, blah, blah. I want to mention 3 specific things. First, people often don't understand the value of their data. Okay. So for example, your medical data on the black market, it sells for 5,000 to 8,000 rupees. Why? Because I can use that data to fraudulently charge insurance companies money. Okay. I don't advise everyone to do this, but there are detailed lists of, if you have private data on an individual, how much you can sell it for. And, there have been think tanks across the world. So the US, for example, there's a particular group that has made a full list. If your data gets stolen, here's how much it costs. And then when people see that cost, when people realize that a scan of my driving license can be sold for $20, then they realize I shouldn't maybe be giving out scans of my driving licenses, right? There's also
value associated with it. Unfortunately, I'll have to quickly ask you to jump to your last point because I have a lot of questions for you.
Sorry, you go. I'll quickly just say the last thing, which is we've been talking a lot about companies profiling or analyzing data. That is one part of privacy. The next set of problems that are going to be coming are not with analysis, but with synthesis. And we're seeing some of this. So if someone takes my face and makes a deep fake, right, and puts me in, I don't know, a porn video, right? Is that a breach of my privacy?
Of course.
Right? Like, so, but that's not, that property is owned by that other person, right? They've generated it. What if it's not something as distinctive as my face? Suppose I'm an author, I write a lot, and someone trains a certain version of GPT on that and produces new content written in my style. My style of writing is being stolen. Is that a breach of my privacy? Like, all of these things need to be thought about at a social level, and society needs to come to terms with it, right? So I want to flag this sort of generative side of privacy because that's what's coming next.
You've raised a lot of pertinent questions. I mean, starting from the definition of privacy to the legal framework surrounding it, to even what exactly constitutes as private property. You've even brought in the idea of intellectual property and who owns what. So before we move on to the audience and take questions from them, one question I have for you, Professor, is basically how, I mean, you talked about how the economy is changing and we are in a data economy, but we're also in a surveillance economy where data is money. So when you talk about a legal framework, and you said we need to have categories, secret data, sensitive data, and, you know, personal data, but we see a lot of legislations doing away with them, right? And having one generic category that overall covers it, that says that we can introduce other verticals. On the other hand, you also have legislations like the GDPR in the European Union, which again separately define it. So what kind of model? Because a lot of people have argued that things like the GDPR stifle innovation. So do you think that which kind of model is preferable? A kind of a legal framework which is easier to adopt, or a legal framework wherein you are giving the users protection at the same time while telling them that your data will be protected, and at the same time encouraging innovation?
So I'm an absolutist about this stuff. Yes, GDPR stifles innovation, brakes stifle speed, but we still have them for a reason, right? I'm sure if you let governments have unfettered access to everyone's homes without a warrant, more criminals would get caught. But we don't allow that. We say, no, it's private property. You can't come in here. It doesn't matter how much easier your life would be, right? So of course, life would be easier for some people if you allowed ABCD, but that's not the set of principles upon which we should build up this stuff. There's stuff which is mine and you can't have it, right? And I think once you have those set of principles in place, and it needs to be for India an Indian set of principles because it's not the same, right? Our taboos around things like, let's say, salaries, our discussions around caste, these are all very, very different from other places in the world. And we need to have an Indian specific legislation that looks at all of this stuff. I think we are very far away from that, right? I've read the current bills, and these are written by clever people, but as has become common, it's government serving governments and not the people they are supposed to be serving, right? So I think there needs to be a lot more stakeholder discussions. There are very good people in government. It's not some caricature like evil state, okay? There are some very clever people around, and I hope that, you know, more discussions like this with people in power will lead to some positive outcomes. But we have a long way to go.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much, Benny, Aditya, and Professor Gupta. I have a lot of questions from the audience here. My chat box is blowing up. So I'm going to throw the floor open to them. So the first one is from Kriti Singh, who says, how do we determine the technological readiness of the privacy tech solutions? Is there a consensus on determining it, especially its quality? I mean, the floor is open to any of the speakers, whoever would like to take the question. Aditya, would you like to field this one, considering it's about the readiness and the quality of privacy tech?
No, I think I mean I'm probably a little behind in terms of my view on how ready privacy tech is. I think we're still trying to define what privacy is, and I'm seeing so many variations of how people think about privacy amongst our consumer base that it's hard to tell whether we are ready or not. We talk about blockchain and some of these other things that are more immutable coming, but I feel we're a little bit further away from. For me, identity is a more compelling and more defined subject that I'm trying to tackle, which does have a privacy angle, but not specifically around privacy as a definition.
Right. This one is for Professor Debayan from Shruti Shreya. Given the not so sustainable approach taken by the governments on critical privacy enabling technologies like encryption, what is the future of privacy tech in India?
So I think there's going to be a lot of ups and downs. The problem is that the government of India, and it's not just India, this is UK, US, Australia. I want you to think about the ages of the politicians who are calling the shots. These are all people who are 60, 70, sometimes older. Now think about the people in your life and in that particular age group and their ability to engage with modern technology. Now I want you to think about what the outcome is likely to be. I hope I'm not being ageist, but I'm just talking about averages, right? It is what you expect is exactly what is happening. These people are making laws without understanding what they're making laws about. The problem with making laws about this stuff is that the laws of mathematics kind of don't care about the laws of India. And when those two come into a clash, I know who's going to win.
Well, let's hope that privacy wins over the laws of mathematics in this case, because that's what we are all pushing for. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. A big thank you to the India Internet Governance Forum and the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology for providing us this platform to exchange some brilliant ideas. Benny, Aditya, Professor Debayan, thank you. Thank you so much for those lovely insights. Thank you, Kamesh, for that great introduction and the dialogue for actually organizing this session. It was a pleasure having you all. I am Diksha Bhardwaj. I was your moderator for this session. I hope that you have taken away as much as I have from our discussions. Thank you again, all of you.
Thanks, Diksha.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.